transformative change. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a 3-year project financed by the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. Was started in February 2019 and it will end by January 2022. In case that the extension of the project will be approved by the European Commission, the project will finish then by the end of April 2022. As you can see, the consortium has been built such as the partner bring their insight and expertise in order to address both the quantitative and qualitative research on populist parties and populist movement in different European countries. Thus, we have 4 universities, Manchester Metropolitan University in UK, who is the coordinator of the project, University in Salzburg, Technical University in Dresden, Helsinki University, and of course we have different organization dealing with civic engagement, innovative creation of a dashboard, and ethical part of the project. And those are trilateral research in Ireland and Center for Liberal Strategies, which is a research center based in Bulgaria. So next slide, please. The PACE project aims to understand associated with populist politics. As you can see, we don't want to avoid or just stop the populist movement, but try to address and understand better, and also at the same time to build upon the lessons of positive example. This is the reason why City of Reykjavik is a part of the project as a model of democracy in Europe, and why we are doing this in order to play a part in constructing a firm democratic and institutional foundation for the citizens in Europe. Next slide. How we are going to do this? First of all, we are trying to trace the historical growth of populist parties and populist movements in different European countries, started with 1990 until nowadays, and see how this populist party will have political consequences, and also consequences on the democracy in Europe. Also, we are interested to look into the general and specific populism, and we are looking into the macro level, the country, and also the micro level political parties. And of course, there are different work packages and different academics and researchers studying this causal mechanism and also the historical growth. And of course, based on their research, we are trying to provide a policy recommendation that they are going to be shared with different stakeholders and policy actors, which is happening, of course, today, in order to try to improve in the future the policy and support better the democracy values in Europe. We are also looking how we can strengthen the democratic values and practices, and see whether and to what extent the traditional and social media have influence on the democracy and on the public opinion. And last but not the least, engage with different stakeholders and organize this democracy lab in order to tackle better the attitudes towards the voting the populist party, and also how to strengthen the democratic values. Next slide, please. So one of the tasks of the Objective 5 of the project, which is dealing with the engagement of the stakeholder, was to carry out 7 local democracy labs. I would like to emphasize that the selection of location where democracy labs were carried out is in line with one of the research in the work package 1, which is providing case studies on populism and nativist parties and social movements in different European countries. Also, the reason why we have been choosing these particular countries, it was to tackle better the opinion of people in trust in authorities in different countries. Therefore, we have selected Nordic, Western, Eastern, Central, and Southern European countries. Of course, originally when we planned the local democracy labs, we wanted to organize in person, but now the situation just teach us how to reshape and innovatively create and provide a different methodology for local democracy lab. Therefore, we come with a hybrid solution organizing both in person and online. So the first pilot on in-person democracy lab was in September 2019 in Italy. And then first online pilot has been organized in Iceland in January, followed by the Spain in March, Scotland in April, Hungary in May, Poland in June, and Bulgaria in July. Next slide, please. So the topic of the local democracy lab was trust in authorities in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, this topic was not originally planned, but because of the situation, we reshape it. The purpose of the local democracy labs, it was to assess the public attitudes to an aspiration toward democracy, to try to identify different ways of democratic involvement and participation, to understand how traditional and social media might influence political and social opinion, and of course engage with stakeholders, including in here underrepresented groups and minority groups. So the discussion session have been proposed to participants the PACE team proposed an innovative deliberation format which has been divided in three stages. So the first stage, it was a starting up, which is also an innovation of the PACE project. We create the event in Your Priorities platform, or better Reykjavik, that has been created by Robert Bjarnason, which is the Citizen Foundation, one of the partner of the PACE project. And why we have created this? Because we try to implement the transformative change and bring the technology into the democracy. So the participant had the opportunity to get familiar with the topic, discuss and propose ideas around the topic, and also contribute with the ideas to the other participant by voting up and down. The second stage, it was the online deliberation in a Zoom communication platform where the participants were virtually meeting together and discuss around the topic. And the last stage, it was a follow-up, again opening your priorities and enable the participant to share their opinion about this format of the democracy lab and whether they have other ideas that has not been expressed in an online deliberation platform. Next slide, please. So three discussion sessions have been proposed to participants in a virtual breakout rooms that has been led by an expert facilitator using three questions in order to guide the discussion among participants. So the first session has proposed an explorative questions whether the participant had the opportunity to express their experience regarding the how the authorities handled the situation with the COVID-19. The second session, we propose a deepening questions where the participants have expressed the feeling about the restriction implemented by authorities locally, regionally, and nationally. And the third session, we propose a reflective question in the future pandemic situation, how the recommendation or what kind of recommendation the participants would have for different authorities. Next, please. So the total number of registered participants, as you can see, were 282, and 53%, 150 participants attend local democracy labs, all 7 local democracy labs. The inclusion criteria for our democracy lab, we didn't use a stratification or standardized selection of participants, but we keep in mind underrepresented group. Therefore, we wanted to have an age balance, young, middle-aged, elderly people, gender balance and sexual orientation, ethnic and religious groups, people with immigrant background, people with disabilities. And as you can see, in terms of gender representation, we had more women, 55% they were women, and 44 men. And of course, it's not of course, but only 1.5% of declare other gender attend our event. In terms of education, which is telling us a lot about the level of participation, 80% of the people had a high-level education, compared with only 20% with secondary, primary, and other kind of educational level, which we have to reflect in the future. I would like to mention that this figure does not include Italy, because Italy, it was a pilot, and we did not consider at the time to have more information about the gender and educational level. Next slide, please. So now we are going to look a little bit into results, the key findings we gather in the PACE local democracy labs, and the method that we have been using for the qualitative examination of the participant statements. It was the thematic analysis, which is a very basic one. So we have choose two distinctive levels that have been identified over the global theme, the trust in authorities. The first level reveal the participant view on the quality of the measure applied by the authorities, and they have formulated appreciations, claims, doubt, questions, and also recommendation. Therefore, we have 4 categories: positive insights, critical views, challenges, uncertainties, and recommendation. On the other side, the second level have revealed 2 directions, which is very interesting. We have a common topics which are the same for all 7 democracy labs, and then we will have another topics which are particular for each country. In this situation, the participants unveil whether the strategies have addressed the needs of different groups and different sectors in their country, and what kind of consequences this measure had on their everyday life. So we have 6 common topics for all 7 democracy lab, which is of course a positive insight about the strengths of the authorities measures. And then we have a set of critical views, which are communication and information strategies, coordination and cooperation of authorities, politicization versus expertise and knowledge, monitoring cascading effect, and long-term impact on individual well-being. And the country-specific topic that are going to be discussed on Friday with the participants in the event, which is called European Democracy Lab. So for Bulgaria, the specific topic was media disinformation. In Hungary, public opinion dialogue. In Iceland, protection of economy and employment sector, and I'm referring in here particularly to employment of the immigrant groups, not only, but particularly these. In Italy, how populist narrative affected the public discourse during the pandemic. In Poland, the protection of law and constitution. In Scotland, trust in government and the influence of mass media. And in Spain, strengthen the role of local authorities. Next, please. So now I would like to give you a brief overview of results for each common topics that we have found in the local democracy lab. So first of all, we have the strengths of authorities measures, where the participant appreciate positively different kind of measures. And of course, these are based on different variables that could be considered as a measure of evaluation of trust in different authorities. For instance, one of the variables we consider important to mention is the composition of the civil defense team. For instance, in Iceland, the composition, it was based on the medical expertise and police. Therefore, the worst trusted authorities in Iceland was the healthcare system and medical expertise. Also, The adopted strategies with some time was knowledge-based, political, or mixed approach. And one of the interesting approach has been used in Scotland in order to let the people understand better how to implement the measure in their daily life situation. They have been using representatives of society that took the lead and explained in the media, on the television, what the measures are. Also, the availability of information. The participant appreciated that sometimes the information has been provided in different foreign languages. The official channels, they have been creating different websites where authorities have provided different information, and also the measures have been updated very often into the media. Also, austerity of the measure and impact on the personal life, whether the measure were relaxed or very strict. People sometimes felt secure if the measure was strict in order to protect themselves. The media contribution, the impact of traditional and social media, people cooperation with the authorities for the implementation of measures, accessibility of people to different services, and of course, security of the country and the people. Next slide. The next 4 categories of results will reveal the critical views of participants. And in this situation, the participant mentioned the lack of communication and information strategy, and particularly the clarity, accessibility, and coherence of the information provided. And here we have a very big set of variables that tell us how maybe we can think in the future to adjust and make more accessible the information publicly provided. So we have the language here, and when I mention the language, is not necessarily the foreign language, but also the language provided for different category of people with different level of understanding, with different medical situation, condition, hearing impaired people, visual impaired people who cannot read a normal text. Also, the circumstances, the quantity, the channels, format, timing, origin of information was mentioned important by participants. Also, when the information has been provided in a media, this balance between the foreground and background information was very important, because sometimes the people get confused by presenting a lot of numbers and graphics, at the same time presenting how many people were dying, showing images of the ambulance or medics in a plastic costume and things like this, which create a panic and confusion in people. Also, information has been not always tailored and customized according with different groups, and also minority groups, and also different sectors. The measures were sometimes impulsive, that were broken the laws, constitution, and human rights, which was the case in Poland. And frequently changing the measures was very confusing and creating panic for population. Next slide, please. The next critical view of the participants reveal a lack of coordination, cooperation of different authorities. I can give you an example that the frontline civil defense team, it was always the same. I don't know what was happening in different countries because we didn't go so deep, but in the participants' opinion, it would be important to have a secondary level of teams that can support different kind of issues as a consequences of the COVID pandemic. So I'm referring in here of different level of cooperation. One is the interdepartmental cooperation within the same authority, the interministerial coordination, because they were claiming the evaluation and monitoring of the impact on different sectors in order to minimize the long-term consequences. Also, we have to bear in mind the cross-sectorial and transdisciplinary cooperation when we are dealing with such a complex crisis, which threatening the life of people. The cooperation networking, which was not very well addressed, and I mean here the cooperation between authorities, NGOs, representative, and of course different minority groups which are exposed to marginalization. And last but not the least, the coordination between central government and local authorities. Next one, please. Also, it was a lack of closer monitoring of cascading effects and follow-up strategies. And I'm referring in here the impact on the economic and employment sectors. According to participants, one of the most affected sectors were tourism, culture, entertainment sectors, and also the financial support has not been provided for self-employment and small companies, only for the big companies. So this will have a long-term effect also for different authorities and the finance in the government. The democracy and human rights have been affected. The healthcare sectors and well-being has not been very well monitoring. Therefore, people with chronic disease and other illness, they have not been monitored. Disruptive behavior have increasing in the time of the COVID, such as domestic violence, violence towards animals, and also some category of people like homeless, single people and children have not been monitored very well according to the participants. Next, please. And the last category of critical view is the assessment of the long-term impact on people's well-being. So here participants have been recommending, in our view, a very valuable recommendation that we would like to suggest to be considered for the future policy strategies and action. And one of this is preventive measure and resilience strategies and program, both at individual and community level, because after discussing with different authorities about the result of the local democracy lab, they were criticizing that sometimes the citizen residents are passive and they are waiting only for the authorities to provide the measures. Therefore, resilient mechanisms for population would be important. Also, preventing strategies for new generation to know how to react in the future crisis, protection measure for disadvantaged groups, policy for social isolation such as support groups, psychological support intervention, healthy lifestyle programs, e-health services for people, public education and information policy. And I found very interesting the suggestion of the participant to provide critical thinking training, fake news analysis program, because they said they were not prepared to make the difference between the true or a fake information, and training for digital literacy, that it was sometimes a difficulty in different countries. Next one. So after a more in-depth analysis of the outcome of the local democracy labs, there are four main categories of topics that particularly draw my attention, and these are the communication strategies for public information, political leadership and political agenda, individual and community engagement and resilience mechanism, and coordination, cooperation between different authorities and organizations. And in our view, these four topics are very much related. Of course, they are not exclusive, only these topics. Definitely there are other topics that we have to consider, but based on the findings of local democracy, these are the four, which you can go, Sophie, please, to the old diagram just to have an overview. And because these are so much related, we can consider them for policy innovation in order to provide an inclusive society. And why we are doing this, the next, we just continue, yeah, and the next one, because we would like to make a cooperation if this is possible between the resident citizen and the authorities in order to co-design, cooperate, and better coordinate and monitor the available or the needed resources, services, tools, and expertise that we need in order to strengthen the trust in authorities. Next slide, please. So why we were thinking for transformative change and policy innovation? Because one of the particular group of our democracy lab, they were underrepresented groups and minority groups. And I would like to mention that in a situation of that the minority groups are exposed to a crisis or risk factors. You can show, Sophie, all the entire diagram. I think it's easier. So in situation of the crisis and in particular circumstances like a social, economical, and political context, if the individuals are not built with proper resilient and coping strategies, and the authorities could lack of preventive measure, evaluation, and monitoring tools, and inclusive actions, and in the top of this, we have a lack of clarity of and accessibility of information. The minority groups will be very fragile, sensitive, exposed to marginalization, social exclusion. And of course, in the long term, this will have impact on the services and finance that the authorities will provide. That will be more difficult to address. Therefore, a transformative and innovative policy, it would be maybe very helpful. I'm not sure, I don't have the answer how we can do this. Therefore, I need your support and your expertise and insights in order to see how we can tackle better the minority, to provide a minority risk assessment, to build an inclusive society, to provide preventive measures, educational programs, and healthy lifestyle in order to better integrate the minority groups into the society. And the next slide, we can also provide, Sophie, the entire diagram. So I was trying to see and envisage and make a relation between the outcome of the local democracy labs and how we can shift to the transformative change and policy innovation. And I was inspired by the building engineering because the society and the interrelation between different groups is based on the foundation of the society with norms and values and belief, culture, identity. And on the top, we have the authorities with norms, law, regulation. And every pressure which is coming from the top or from the bottom, it brings some cracking in the interrelation between different groups and different individuals. Therefore, I think we need innovative tools program for evaluation monitoring in different levels, micro level, meso level, and macro level. And for this, I think we have to think about a new concept, framing pattern, a body of language, science and technology innovation properly adapted for the people needs, the social innovation. We need to implement research in the institution and policy innovation for a transformative change. And the next slide, please, Sophie. Next one. I will escape this. So I would like to finish my presentation by inviting you to reflection based on being inspired by one of the participant statement, which sounds like this: need to say what is at stake, the conflict between individuals and society. All this invites to reflect on the composition of the society and what is our role as citizens, and what is the danger that expects us in the future. Thank you so much. So if you'd like to provide your insights, your experience, ask questions, Sophie is also with me. She can share with you different lessons that we have from the local democracy lab, because it's nothing perfect. We try to improve ourselves, but Please be free to criticize and bring your insight.
Sophie, do you want to say anything to add to what Roxana said?
Yeah, well, I think that was a great presentation by Roxana. So thanks for sharing all these insights. We as Democratic Society, we co-organized this together with City of Reykjavik and Citizens Foundation. So we were mainly focusing on the recruitment of different people and also including minority groups. And of course, you have seen who we have recruited, so I will not go into that. But what was very important, I think, in these local democracy labs was that all participants almost mentioned that there was almost no where to express about their experiences of COVID and the restrictions. So I think this was a huge asset for most people joining in, to be able to express their concerns, but also what they thought the government should do. And there was really great insights and recommendations that we invite you to read also in the more elaborate analysis reports, with thanks also to Roxana from City of Reykjavik and also the local partners, because I also want to mention that we organize this always in collaboration with local partners, meaning a civil society organization being experienced in the field. And we also organized this in local language. So that made it, that way we made sure that people were expressing in their own language, and that we had professional facilitators there to facilitate this process. And then later on, building the report based on what has been said, but also making sure that they were able to get the results of this whole process in a report, and also for policy actors to read the reports, and then also have the report always translated into local language, because not everybody was speaking English. So we made sure that we had it both in English and in their local language. So I will share maybe the link in chat where you can find these reports if you're interested to read more. And they are very interesting to read. And each country have created one. And feel free to also take a look on other reports that were created by PACE, because there's a lot to find on our website. So we are under Work Package 5, which stands for Dissemination and Engagement. So I will share with you a link in chat. And there's a long list of reports there. So you have to scroll down to Work Package 5 if you want to see the reports of the local democracy labs. So this is the link to the reporting. And there's also some reports on what we have learned as an organizing team. And Roxana already mentioned what we learned about finding the participants, for example. So, for example, there were more women than men. That was not, by the way, the case for all local democracy labs. So we had some disbalance in some countries, but it was very different overall. And also you saw that we reached more to highly educated groups. And I must also mention here that some people were not able to join because of, for example, work or children or other commitments they had on the day of the event. So they were interested in joining, but because this was a voluntary event, some of them couldn't join. And also the topic, which is of course on populism and civic engagement, or that's the main sort of project title. But the democracy lab, what does democracy mean? What do I feel attached, or do I feel invited to join? So we tried to make it very clear that this was about trust in government. And we also tried to break it down into the pandemic, and then what was the consequences of this whole pandemic for your trust in government. So make it as tangible as possible.
Good. Linda, did you want to ask a question? I saw you briefly unmuted yourself. Or Christian? No? Are there any questions or comments or anything? Okay, well, I mean, I've got some. I would like. Can you give me any idea as to how all these factors they talked about varied by country. So, because you gave an overview of what was important everywhere, but I didn't get a sort of sense of, in Spain, what was most important in, etc. Maybe just give an impression of that. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think we are going to go more in depth in the European Democracy Lab, but of course in different countries there were particular issue based maybe on the category of the measures or they have been applied by different authorities. Therefore, the people were finding at a certain point that the public opinion has not been involved in the discussion, and they didn't consider the particular needs of different communities. And what I can give you a very eloquent example, it was in Scotland, because the media, the traditional and social media, has been considered contributing to the way the measure have been implemented or addressed to the public. Sometimes the participant had the impression that the media made a lot of space for the politics. They have been using the situation and the expertise of different people in Scotland just to provide the space for political leader. And also they have been action as a surveillant, because they were flying with the helicopter. This is the experience of the participant, flying with the helicopter, just following the people in the place, whether they are following the measures or not. This was the feeling of the participants. And also on the other side, they said they have been exposed by media also only on the negative side of the pandemic. And it was a very nice sentence coming up from a Scottish participant. They said that at certain points we were overwhelmed with information provided in media that we could not live without, but we could not live with either. Therefore, we just shut down looking into the news, and they have been creating a special, how do you call it, groups on the Facebook, just to share the information between them and support each other.
But I mean, so for example, the misinformation topic, was that more prevalent in certain countries? What I was asking for is you to give an example. In Spain, this was the most important topic. In Iceland, this was the most important topic.
Yeah. This was the most, the example I gave you before, it was the most relevant for Scotland. For instance, it was the protection of economy and employment sector, because the most affected employment sector in Iceland was tourism, where mostly the immigrants are working. So they felt they have not been supported. They lost their job. And they didn't know where to gather information for applying for employment support, or how they can support themselves.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then. Do you want to wrap up, Sophie?
Yeah, we can wrap up. And thanks for your question, Bruce. I think also if you are interested to learn more about the different labs, I would again say go to the research reports. They are there for you to also get an understanding. They all contain a summary, so you don't need to read the whole report if you don't have the time. But they all contain a summary, so to understand better the differences in the countries. But like Roxana said, there were quite some similarities. And for example, in Scotland, there was this mass media influence that was quite important. But each country had their own specifics, but there were quite also some similarities. And coming Friday, we will organize a European Democracy Lab. And then we will discuss two of the common outcomes. So first of all, the communication and information flow done about COVID and how this was impacting for people. So every country, there were comments about this, that there was a lack of good and trustful and transparent communication flow or information flow by the government. And this is what we're going to dive into on Friday. And we have invited 2 people from European Commission to give an expert session first to participants, and then we will come up with recommendations for these experts. And the second topic that was also very present in all of the countries was about the long-term consequences, and especially on mental health and well-being. And even this morning, I saw in the Dutch newspaper, I'm based in the Netherlands, that there was mentioned that there's a huge increase of mental health issues, and it's still increasing now that we're going back to lockdowns. Some of us, there's an increasing problem with this. So we will also have somebody from World Health Organization introducing the session, and we will create recommendations on mental health and well-being. So you can expect to also read more about that later on after this event happening coming Friday. But if you want to know more about it, please feel free to contact us. I can share again maybe the last slide of the presentation we had. There you can see our website, our Twitter, our Facebook, but also if you want to know more, you can find on the website our contact details. And yeah, we will be happy to discuss more with you about it. So feel free to always ask questions and contact us. And I want to thank you for joining us today. Maybe Roxana, the final word for you.
Yeah, so thank you very much for attending, and I would like just to make it easier, maybe by the end of January we will provide the overall report with the results from all 7 democracy labs in order to be easier for everybody to read it, and it will be shorter. So we will let you know when it will be ready.
Shorter and shorter until it becomes a haiku, 17 syllables.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay,
thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Enjoy your day. Bye-bye. Bye. I think maybe I should close, Sophie, right? If I cannot hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I think we can close it. Nice to see the compliments in the chat. Thank you so much, Roxana.
Okay, thank you so much for support and being complimentary with me. It was really nice. Thank you so much.
Great presentation, and see you later.
See you. Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.